The day finally arrived. I've been looking forward to this country since I began my journey through Latin America nearly a year ago. I made it to Argentina. To my amusement, the first thing I saw after disembarking the plane was an advertisement for a Chinese international bank. I tried to arrive at a new destination before it gets dark. Sunset in Latin America is typically around 6 to 7 p.m. But it was nearly 8 p.m. and still bright when I landed in Buenos Aires. I booked my accommodation in the neighborhood of Almagro. Many tourists and foreigners like to stay in the neighborhood of Palermo, but I wanted something more casual and local-centric. My host was a woman named Martina. The apartment had 2 bedrooms. She lived in the master bedroom with a double bed, and I lived in the smaller one with a single bed. Being on the petite side has its perks while traveling. Single rooms are cheaper and provide me with more than enough space for a comfortable night's rest. There was also a ceiling fan in my room, which I love. Martina was a psychologist. I heard this was a popular career choice in Argentina, which has the highest rate of psychologists per capita in the world. She held consultations in another apartment on the same floor. Sometimes she rented out her bedroom and slept in her office to help make ends meet in the difficult economy. I had to spend more time in this country to fully grasp what a difficult economy truly meant. Martina didn't speak English, and I spoke broken, unsophisticated Spanish, but by observing the way she decorated her home, I could see she loved art, film, and antiques. On the coffee table was a tall stack of art books: Caravaggio, Cézanne, Picasso, Degas. I wondered if she bought them all at the same time or slowly added to the collection over the years. Also on the coffee table was an ornate keepsake box with a portrait of Frida Kahlo on the lid. Inside were DVDs. In the corner of the living room was a bookshelf with more DVDs. I assumed Martina watched films on her laptop because her TV was unplugged and I didn't see a DVD player anywhere. Family photos lined the top of the antique secretary desk. One showed her son as a young man, maybe in his early 20s. Another photo showed him older, possibly mid-30s. Mother and son had the same nose and smile. Martina said he was also a psychologist and holds consultations in another apartment on the same floor. I saw no signs of his father in any of the family photos. Next to the front door was an antique sewing machine. Martina used the foot pedal to hold her shoes, which I thought was clever. Her flatware, cups, tea kettle, even her sandwich press all looked like antiques. The only modern appliance was the blender. If it weren't for the Wi-Fi modem and her laptop, I'd think we were in a different decade. Martina looked to be in her early 60s. The ends of her long gray hair were tinted purple. She didn't seem to eat much. I saw eggs, tomatoes, and oranges in the fridge, but I only ever saw her drink mate and mix a few spoons of vitamin powder with water in the morning and evenings. The kitchen was on the smaller side, and Martina told me not to fry anything if I wanted to cook. I decided to take a break from cooking hot meals that week and began making salads instead. It was summer in Argentina after all, and local produce was abundant and affordable. Cherries were in season, along with peaches, plums, and grapes, all superb quality. There was a small produce shop on every block, as well as a bakery, coffee shop, cheese shop, and butcher. For my first meal in Buenos Aires, I was eager to try the famous Argentine steaks. Martina recommended a casual Italian restaurant around the corner. She said she wasn't good with technology and drew me a map on a piece of paper, saying this method was easier. I waited patiently as she drew a grid and starred her recommendations. I thanked her, took the hand-drawn map, and walked out of the building while typing the restaurant names into my phone. There were 2 options. One was more expensive but better quality. The other was cheap, with decent quality. I went to the more expensive option because I wanted my first meal to be a good one. When I arrived, the doors were chained and padlocked. There was a handwritten note taped to the glass saying the owners were on vacation and would be back next week. Amused and a little disappointed, I walked over to the cheaper restaurant, hoping it was open. It was indeed open and looked very casual. The waiter gestured to the empty tables, inviting me to sit anywhere. I looked at the menu and wasn't sure what to order. I've never been much of a steak eater, so I'm not familiar with the vocabulary for different cuts of meat in English, let alone Spanish. I actually had my first bite of steak when I was 16, and I didn't like it much. After all these years of living in the United States, steak is one of the few Western foods my parents adopted into their Northern Chinese diet. After buying a house, my father made it a priority to buy a grill and learn the art of cooking a steak. The only word on the menu I recognized was asado, which I thought meant barbecue, but it was under the column labeled carne, so I guessed it also meant something else. Well, I wasn't sure what I was ordering, but I ordered it anyways and took a photo of the menu to translate all these new vocabulary words later. 20 minutes passed, and the waiter presented me with a heaping plate of grilled short ribs that was enough for 2 people. In the United States, it would have cost over $50, but the bill came to a total of $8. My meal came with a side, and I chose a salad instead of French fries in efforts to keep a balanced diet. The salad was the most pathetic thing I've ever seen. A clear and unabashed statement that here it was all about meat. Later on, I learned that back in the 70s, a local politician was shot and killed while having lunch in this restaurant. I wonder what he was eating. I finished my delicious meal and checked the time. It was after 8 p.m. and the restaurant was still mostly empty. Argentinians usually have dinner anywhere between 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. I found out many restaurants don't even open for dinner until 8. This sounded ludicrous to me since I normally eat dinner between 6 and 7, and my parents eat dinner even earlier. At the same time, it made sense because sunset here was so late. I'd been sleeping in so much lately, often waking up after 10 a.m. Changing locations and getting acquainted with a new bedroom every other week took a toll on my sleeping patterns. I asked one of my Argentinian friends about the sleeping and eating schedule here. He said most jobs start at 9 a.m. Lunch is midday. Afternoon tea is around 5 or 6 p.m. with coffee, pastries, cakes, or other sweets. Then dinner is around 10 p.m. People rarely go to bed before midnight, and some like to get up early to exercise before work. I did the math. Did this mean people only slept 5 or 6 hours per night? My friend laughed and said, "Yes, we Argentinians are insane. And if you don't have to get up early to be somewhere, then don't feel guilty about sleeping in as long as you want." I decided to take my friend's advice. On my first night in Buenos Aires, I made the same blunder I made in Medellin. Both my host and the internet said the tap water was safe to drink. I made the mistake of believing them. Of course, locals would be used to their own tap water, but I'm not a local. After filling my water bottle at the sink and guzzling all its contents, I spent the evening curled up in bed with stomach cramps. Luckily, I felt better the next morning, and more importantly, I learned my lesson for good. Using the bidet was a new experience. I'm familiar with this hygiene process and actually prefer it to toilet paper. During my 4 years living in Vietnam, I never bought a single roll. The difference is, Vietnam has a handheld bidet, while Argentina has a separate unit which you sit on. I was confused as to which direction I was supposed to face and consulted some instructional videos on my phone. The next day, I had empanadas for lunch and milanesa for dinner. Milanesa is a thin, crispy cutlet made by breading and frying beef, veal, or chicken. There were about 10 different kinds to choose from. Like many Asians, I have a slight lactose intolerance and asked the waitress which one had no cheese. She replied they all had cheese except for the classic one, so that's what I ordered. My meal came with French fries and a wedge of lemon. It was delicious. The bill was $5.50. The next day, I tried choripan, which was a grilled chorizo sausage served on a crusty roll. I didn't enjoy it as much because it was quite salty, but I'm glad I tried it. Afterwards, I went to a local bakery and tried medialunas, which were a sweeter, denser croissant. I also ordered a different flaky pastry with dulce de leche, which was a rich, creamy caramel spread. Both were delectable, and I was looking forward to making my way through all the different baked goods Argentina had to offer. While I was looking at my options, a group of friendly Argentinians helped me choose. They lived in Canada, but had family in Buenos Aires. They told me there were 2 types of medialunas. In the morning, you have the sweet ones, which were made with honey and butter. For afternoon tea, you have the savory ones, which were made with lard. Both were delicious, but I preferred the sweet ones. Martina drank only mate and didn't have a coffee maker in the apartment. I took this opportunity to sample the abundant cafe options in the neighborhood. The average flat white cost about $2 or less. My freelance work has been much lighter recently, so I decided to spend my free time exploring the city. I walked for 4 to 5 hours a day. Some neighborhoods in Buenos Aires looked just like Paris or New York City. Most importantly, I felt safe while walking alone. I can't stress enough how big a role this plays in enjoying a foreign country, or anywhere for that matter. Of course, not every single neighborhood in Buenos Aires is safe, but 5 or 6 were enough for me to explore. I realized even locals don't explore every single corner of their city. A few well-chosen neighborhoods can offer more than enough to satisfy daily life. A few days later, I met up with my friend Alfredo, who was in Buenos Aires for the week before returning to Mexico City, where he lived and worked. He usually spent the summer months on his parents' farm outside of Mendoza. His brother was in university and had an apartment in the residential neighborhood of Belgrano. At the beginning of this journey through Latin America, I lived in a large shared house in Mexico City with Alfredo and 8 other people, so it was comforting to see a familiar face again. We sat by the pool, drinking mate and eating an assortment of empanadas. There was chicken, spicy chicken, beef, spicy beef, and sweet beef, which was Alfredo's favorite and a flavor I haven't tried yet. He explained you could tell which empanada had what filling by looking at the pattern of the edges. The mate cup was fascinating. He had 3 different kinds. The traditional design was lined with wool on the inside, and he used it only for unsweetened mate. A second traditional design was only for sweetened mate. The third, more modern design was the one he preferred the most. It had a steel interior and no wool lining, which was more hygienic and easy to clean. Alfredo had a dilemma. After a recent promotion, he was offered 2 different positions. The deadline to choose was that afternoon. Both positions had the same salary and were based in Mexico City. One was more technically driven, with regular 9 to 5 hours, and specialized further in the company service. He just finished a master's degree, so it would be nice to use his resting hours to actually rest. The other job would require a much heavier workload. It was essentially the same job Alfredo already did, but at a much larger scale. He'd be well set up to move to a different company and a higher position after a few years. After consulting colleagues, family, and friends, Alfredo still couldn't decide which offer to accept, and both managers were pushing for an answer, one of whom was leaving for her honeymoon that evening. Alfredo joked about consulting a Mexican shaman. A phone consultation cost 700 Mexican pesos, which was about $40. I didn't have any opinion on the matter. but I knew he was a competitive, ambitious person and a quick learner, so I had a feeling he'd choose the second option. Alfredo loved Argentina, but was relieved to be employed by an international company that paid a high salary in a stable currency. He was 26 and dating a sweet Mexican guy who wanted a committed relationship, but Alfredo wasn't ready for commitment, so they broke up. He was taking some time off work soon and planned on joining a surf camp in Costa Rica, but then realized surf camps in Mexico were much cheaper and decided to keep it local. He asked what book I was reading at the moment. He wanted a recommendation for his beach vacation. I was in the middle of Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. The story follows a disillusioned vampire named Louis as he recounts his centuries-long existence to a reporter. Haunted by his transformation and yearning for humanity, Louis details his struggles with his maker, Lestat, and a young vampire named Claudia, all searching for meaning and connection in a world that fears them. It wasn't exactly beach reading, but it was an incredible novel. Alfredo asked if the vampires were gay. I laughed and said the two male vampires certainly have a complex and rather passionate relationship, though it's never explicitly stated in the text. We hugged goodbye, and I went back to my apartment to pack. I was heading to Patagonia tomorrow. After months of traveling through the vibrant countries of Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, Argentina felt distinctly different and was a welcome change. Before my arrival, I spent 2 months in Peru and visited Machu Picchu. Many travelers use an agency or book a hiking tour to get there, but I decided to visit this world wonder on my own. Find out how I did it in this video.